He may or may not be meeting Kim, but yesterday Trump met Kim. Kim Kardashian. If someone had shown you that headline, together with the subject matter discussed, prison reform, if someone had shown you the headline just 3 years ago, President Donald Trump meets Kim Kardashian in the White House to discuss prison reform, as someone pointed out on Twitter this morning, the chances of your believing that would be zero. But then again, with Donald Trump, expect absolutely anything. Expect anything. And they are rising like Lazarus in the era of President Putin. You really couldn't make up the headlines from yesterday. All the neocon froths were out and raging that the Russians had murdered another Kremlin critic. With apologies to William Shakespeare, the brave man dies only once. The Kremlin critic dies many times before his death. It was all fake news. Nobody killed the Russian dissident journalist in Kiev. Nobody laid a finger on him. Least of all, President Putin. It was fake news. And given the gangsterism, Wild West, foaming at the mouth racism and anti-Semitism, currently running wild on the streets of the Ukraine, where Ukraine's remaining Jews are literally locking themselves into their houses because the followers of Adolf Hitler are running the show. They're on the streets in their thousands, wearing swastikas, Sieg Heiling, jackbooting. That's the kind of place the Ukraine is now. Well, given all that, nothing surprises coming out of Kiev. What is utterly damning, unanswerably damning, is the immediate Pavlovian jerk to judgment of the Western media, particularly the so-called liberal media. I mean, not only should you never confuse me with a liberal, I've got to tell you, I hate liberals with a small L more than I hate anybody else. The Guardian leapt into print, not just accepting the gangster fake news of an assassination that never happened, was entirely fabricated, but going immediately on to the offensive. The faded fop, Michael White, asked in The Guardian how long before the usual suspects, did he mean me and people like me, the usual suspects would leap into counter-accusation, blaming this, that, and the next person or organization for this dastardly crime? Or would we, he asked, choose complicit silence? A period of silence from Michael White would have saved him some embarrassment this morning. The BBC, the once famous, trusted, global news source of first choice, didn't even check if the man was dead before they were assailing. They were accusing another state, another president, of having ordered the hit that never was. I honestly thought the Skripal story would be difficult to top. But the story from the Ukraine yesterday is the number one. It takes the biscuit. And all these foaming at the mouth Russophobes didn't miss Jeremy Corbyn. One of them on Twitter has become a famous think, centrist dad, he's called. He went right on to the attack. And do you know what he said? Corbyn will be demanding all the evidence before he agrees to point the finger at Putin. At least he had the grace later to delete that foolish statement, unlike Michael White, unlike the BBC. This poses a big, big question, dear listeners. If the Ukraine could fake the death of the Russian journalist yesterday, what else have they faked? If there's organophosphates in the air, if there's deadly Novichok in the air, if there's military-grade nerve agents in the air, the Ukraine has got them too. As a former important part of the ex-Soviet military-industrial complex, there is nothing that the Ukraine doesn't have. And as we can now see all too clearly, it's not true, Mrs. May, that only Russia had a motive for attacking the Skripals. The Ukraine had a motive for attacking the Skripals and blaming it on Putin, as they did yesterday when they faked the murder of a dissident Russian journalist. And how is he a dissident, by the way? Because he openly welcomed the death in a crash of 92 members of the Red Army Choir. He openly laughed he did, at the beheading of a Russian in the hands of ISIS in Syria. He's hated in Russia, to be sure. But killing him in Kiev, just like killing the Skripals in Salisbury, would serve Russia less than it would serve those who wish to damage, smear Russia as it builds up less than a fortnight from now to the World Cup 2018. So I'm asking, how many other of Putin's crimes have been carried out, in fact, by others, and in fact, by the Wild West gangster, Nazi, anti-Semite state of Ukraine? And I say this with all sincerity as someone who loves Kiev, one of the world's greatest cities. These endless provocations by Ukraine against Russia cannot end well. They must end badly. And sensible people in Ukraine must already know that. I'll be talking to Dr. John Nielsen Wright, Senior Research Fellow for Northeast Asia at Chatham House, lecturer in International Relations at Cambridge University, the fourth best university in the entire world. I've always been a supporter of Cambridge versus Oxford and the exchanged places in the world ranking tables. Cambridge is up to 4, Oxford down to 5. Dr. John Nielsen Wright will talk to me about Kim and Trump, and I don't mean Kardashian. And it's an all-points alert for Andrew O'Hagan. Andrew O'Hagan, writing in the London Review of Books, has produced, as he always does, many thousands of very powerful words, analyses and accusation on the Grenfell towering inferno. He comes to some surprising conclusions that I very much wanted to talk to him about. Unfortunately, he's not available for any interviews, even turning down Channel 4 News, his publicist just told us, perhaps especially Channel 4 News. Because who does Andrew O'Hagan blame? for what happened in the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower slaughter, he blames Jon Snow, described in the Daily Mail as a left-wing television reporter. Could have fooled me. Jon Snow apparently was the one who whipped up class hatred and resentment and fatally skewed the narrative over the Grenfell disaster. Who does Andrew O'Hagan exculpate? Mr. Paget Brown, the Tory head of the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea Council, who resigned a couple of weeks after the disaster. He shouldn't have, according to Andrew. He's entirely blameless. The council, entirely blameless. Who does he blame for the disaster itself? Well, don't you know? Andrew O'Hagan blames the fire brigade. That's right, the firefighters. The ones who ran into the flames. The ones who didn't have the right breathing apparatus to reach above the 10th floor. The ones who didn't have the right ladders to get beyond the 10th floor. The ones who didn't have helicopters to rescue people off the roof. The fire brigade, whose fire stations had been completely, savagely, nearly demolished. In that area, 4/5 of firefighting resources had been lost in the last 5 years. And who does Andrew O'Hagan blame for all of that? He blames the fire brigade. Their switchboard was down in London. Calls were being redirected all across the country. Who does he blame for that? O'Hagan blames the fire brigade. He blames the fire brigade for failing to control and evacuate scores of scorched, incinerated, dead people. No wonder you're not making yourself available for interview, Mr. Andrew O'Hagan.